taposastrology.com. So this is going to be my long video, so we're looking at 30 minutes plus, where I pick something out upcoming astrologically that I think may be important for you to know about in advance. And so today I picked the full moon total eclipse in Scorpio. That's going to happen on the 15th of May 2022 at 9:15 p.m. Pacific time. It is at 25 degrees of Scorpio, 18 minutes. And the theme of this full moon total eclipse is one that's called regeneration. Now, before I get into the whole thing about this eclipse and the meanings, etc., it's important to note that there are only two total eclipses that happen in 2022. One of them is this one in Scorpio, and then the other one is a total eclipse, also a full moon, and it is actually going to be in Taurus, and that will be in November. So I'm making this video actually towards the end of October, very close to the full moon in Aries in 2021. So depending when you actually watch this, if you're watching it as just after I've made it, this really gives you a heads up to sort of look at your calendar and maybe note some things that may be significant to you at this time. So as I mentioned, the theme I think is regeneration we're talking about here. And why do I say that? I say that because it's Scorpio. And so Scorpio is ruled by two planets. The modern ruler, of course, is Pluto, and Pluto is all about regeneration. And of course, then the other ancient ruler is Mars. So Mars is very much part of the action and digging into. And then the Pluto part is we have to transform this or regenerate this into something different. So that's the theme to go with this. We know that because it's Scorpio, we know that the south nodes of the moon are causing this total eclipse. And so when we talk about the south nodes, it's important to know that letting go may also be another theme, but in tandem with that, you can also have incorporation. And that kind of encompasses that whole word of regeneration that I mentioned at the top of this video. You know, the south nodes are what we're supposed to be letting go of. The north nodes are supposed to be what we are heading towards, both collectively and individually during this time period. So it's about a year and a half that we have these nodes in Taurus and Scorpio respectively, starting in mid-January 2022 for a year and a half. So this is where the eclipses will be happening. But I feel the total eclipses are a little more significant. And the reason for that is because to get an eclipse, you actually have to have an intersection of the ecliptic. So that's the path of, it's actually the Earth going around the sun, but a lot of astrologers will say that this is the apparent path of the sun, but it's really the Earth going around the sun. It's the intersection of the ecliptic, the actual north and south node themselves on that, as well as where it is in terms of the moon as well at that time. So it's got to be all three intersecting. And if it's a total eclipse, you know that it's very, very tight orbs. You're not looking at a whole lot of degrees in between each of those different intersections, three intersections. Okay, so that says there's more pressure, there's more significance. But to really have significance, as I've said in other videos, this total eclipse has to be very close in degree to either your sun, your ascendant, or midheaven. That's what I classify. Others astrologers think differently. We could take the moon into consideration, and certainly if you have a stellium of planets, say around that 25-degree mark of Scorpio and or the opposite sign of Taurus, this is going to be a time where you really are going to be required to transform whatever house this falls in for you. And regeneration will be part of what you need to do. So you've got the heads up on that. So what areas of life are we talking about? So Scorpio rules taxes. It rules the stock market. It's physical passion, ecstasy, but it's also revenge. The other thing that Scorpio rules is a house. It rules the 8th house. And the 8th house is shared resources. So that's 401ks, investments, shared bank accounts. It's also inheritances. And, you know, to have an inheritance, somebody has to die. This doesn't mean you are going to die. Typically, this means, obviously, if it's an inheritance for you, someone close to you dies. But it's also the house of the psychological self. And I think a lot of astrologers forget this, that this is a very meaningful house in terms of what do you need to shift inside your head. So on the surface, this would be a great time to make a decision to go in for psychological counseling, or to do some, I suppose, self-analysis could be up for you as well. So that's kind of the areas that we're looking at. Obviously, you need to look at your own chart to see where this falls. I'm going to be covering that after this introduction. I will be covering each of the signs, starting with you, Scorpio, and we will look at both where the moon is and where the sun is. And the reason for that is because this is a full moon. So we've got the moon in one place and we've got the sun in the other place. So I'll see what that interaction is between the moon and the sun for you later on in this video. So the other things that are happening at this full moon total eclipse, notably, is that we have a Mercury retrograde in Gemini. It's approximately 4 degrees at this eclipse. Now this is kind of significance too, because Mercury rules Gemini. It also rules Virgo, but it's particularly ruling Gemini. So this is kind of like a double whammy in a sense, that when we talk classically about a Mercury retrograde, we're always talking about communication problems, back up your computers, be careful who you send your email messages to, get your phone numbers right, get your messages right. So that's all going to come into play at this eclipse as well. Okay. We have that Mercury retrograde also sextiling Jupiter. Now, even though it's a Mercury retrograde, sextiling Jupiter, Jupiter kind of really brings you good luck, gifts, expansion. There's not a lot of bad stuff about Jupiter unless you really are looking for it. So I would say here, even though I said be careful about your communications, because it's a Mercury retrograde, you could accidentally send something or phone somebody accidentally with the Mercury retrograde, but because it's a sextile to Jupiter, it actually turns out in your favor. So consider that at this time too, that even though you may make mistakes of something, it may turn around for you in the end as well. The other thing that's interesting is that we have an ingress of this Jupiter. Jupiter will be going into Aries at 0 degrees. And I've spoken about this before, where 0 degrees and 29 degrees of any sign are critical degrees. Now, when you've got Jupiter or any other planet going into a 0 degree mark, we're talking about new energy. And so what is this new energy? The new energy is Aries. And Aries is the very first sign in the zodiac. And so this talks to then some lucky, initiatory, forward-moving, pioneering, let's do it my way type of energy. So Jupiter also expands. So Jupiter will be expanding all those things that I just mentioned to you. It is doing it my way. That's what it is. It's also courage, because Mars rules Aries. And it's also just forward momentum, because Mars is energy as well, right? And Mars rules Aries. So I see this as some new initiative that comes to play at this eclipse for everybody. But certainly if you've got something at 0 degrees of Aries, this may be more significant to you personally. We also have Venus conjunct Chiron in Aries. So here's another Aries initiatory, courageous energy. It's also a cardinal sign, so this means that leadership will be coming to the fore here, where you personally may have to take charge of, to lead something connected with the whole Scorpio thing of regeneration. So we may see some people coming up through the ranks here collectively to help heal a lot of wounds that are out there. And of course, these could be metaphorical or literal wounds for that matter. I mean, the military is ruled by Aries too, so perhaps the military will be featured at this time as well, where some kind of healing can take place, and new initiatives with regards to the future of the military, because that, of course, the future would be Jupiter, and that Aries at 0 degrees is the military potentially as well. Yeah, I actually get that as an intuitive hit, that there may be some new great initiatives to help heal some aspects of the military here. All right, we also have Mars conjunct Neptune. And of course, that means both these planets are in Pisces. Now, Mars doesn't do so well in Pisces, so it's got to be operating at an extremely high level for it to manifest something really good. Typically, Mars conjunct Neptune would be a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. Mars is energy. It likes forward momentum. It wants to get the facts and move forward with it. Whereas Pisces, and especially Neptune, this is ethereal energy. This is energy that you can't really touch. It's the gas that's out there, the ether that's out there. It's not that fluid water that you can put in a container. This you cannot contain. So at its highest, Mars could certainly bring in some spiritual warriors, some spiritual energy. In fact, that would be a good activity at this time for generally speaking, for the collective, is for pursuit of spiritual type things, meditating. Meditating straight off on the surface would be a great way to use Mars conjunct Neptune. Certainly trying to connect with your higher self would be featured here at this eclipse. And I already talked about Scorpio being sort of a psychological sign, deep thinking, intuition. It could be a wonderful time where you get complete downloads intuitively or psychically that really helps you heal, going back to that whole Chiron thing here too. Yeah. And Neptune also sextiles the north nodes of the moon. Now, I see this as a very subtle type of energy. This is only going to be picked up by those intuitives who really can tap into the higher levels of consciousness, because that's really what this is talking about. It does ask us to listen to our intuition, kind of like those whispers in our ear that we hear and then, you know, we're distracted and go out into the real world and start coping with real world stuff. So this would be a good time also to be listening to those intuitive voices. Now, I always say check with friends or people or advisors that are good if you're trying to make some big decisions here. Nothing wrong with checking in with people that you trust before you move forward. But certainly Neptune will be bringing in a lot of hope and inspiration to the north nodes, which is our destiny. So we're going to really feel that we've got opportunities to get on this destiny path. And the destiny path that we're talking about for this year and a half is on that axis of the whole Scorpio Taurus. So really, this is what we're talking about: the money, investments, real estate, the stock market. So it's really those types of things. It is psychological self as well, and our value system, plus the things we value and collect. So on an aside, that's there too. But that's kind of the areas that we're going to be getting this inspiration that we feel we've got opportunities to go ahead. So this may be that you get a hit for something in the stock market, where you say, you know what, I really think I should invest in this. Check in with an advisor or somebody that you trust and maybe go ahead with it. All right, what I'm going to do next is get into each of either the sun signs or the ascendant. As always, I suggest that you read for your ascendant first. Why? Because that gives you the house. And why is that important? Because the house tells you the area of your life more than likely that you're going to be affected. The sun sign is important because the sun is the most important luminary in your astrological chart. So that's also important to get that as another flavor with regards to how that's going to tinge the house that this eclipse falls in. And I think it's important to also remember that, you know, we're talking about at an eclipse, a sun and a moon. But remember that the sun is our life force, right? And a transiting sun typically can represent men in our life. Whereas we look at the moon, we're looking at emotions and maybe even unconscious stuff like habits, things like that. And then it also represents typically women. All right, we're going to start off with you, Scorpio. So Scorpio, this is your first house. And this is significant for you. And this would be significant for all Scorpios, but in particular, those that have birthdays between the 17th and the 19th of November, or if your ascendant is around the 25-degree mark of Scorpio, or you've got your sun there. So this speaks to, if you do have all that, or one of those things, you can pretty well be guaranteed that there's going to be some significant changes upcoming for you from 6 months to a year. So if you have an eclipse aspecting your chart directly, it's a typical 6-month effect, but it can last a year and sometimes even years. I would have to do your astrological chart to really see that in your chart, but typically you can pretty well count on a 6-month leeway for the actual effects of this happening. And in kind, you can also see a month prior to this. So we're looking here at the 15th of May 2022. So we could really be looking also at the 15th of April 2022 too, where the effects start showing up of this eclipse. It's a total eclipse, like I said, so it's very, very powerful. All right, so Scorpio, you have the sun will actually be in your 7th house. So these are partnerships, business partnerships, and or marriage or serious relationships. But the other thing that you have hosting in your 7th house, of course, is Uranus. Now, Uranus will be around the 14-degree mark. So unless you do have something at that point, you may not have this direct hit of Uranus as well. But certainly if you've got Uranus aspecting some parts of your 7th house, this could be some significant things happening to you. Overall, I would say that you're probably going to have some kind of letting go. You're going to have to let go of something. And because you're looking straight at the opposite house, the 7th house, it's letting go of a partnership or a business partnership or relationship. Now, it doesn't have to be your marriage partner. It could be even, say, your lawyer. You decide that this lawyer isn't any good for you and you want to let them go. Anywhere where you might sign a contract. So this could also involve clients too, Scorpio. So maybe just figure out what is sort of on the cards for you with regards to your 7th house. Is your marriage on the rocks and not salvageable and that you have to move on from it and you just haven't made the move? Well, this eclipse could represent something happening where maybe your partner will step in and say, I'm out of here. But it could also, because it's a total eclipse, it could also not only eclipse somebody out of your life, that's a partnership, but it could eclipse somebody into your life too. So it can go both ways. Either way it goes, it's going to be a significant time for you where you personally are going to have to be letting go of something. So look, we've got a lot of time here, Scorpio, for you to be thinking about what things do I personally need to let go of that may not be serving my partnerships, business partnerships or marriage partnerships. So I'll still be continuing to talk about this over the months. And Scorpio, you can certainly leave me as well as my viewers. We would be interested to hear what happens to you over the next year and a half with regards to both your 1st house and your 7th house, because this isn't going to go away with the north nodes in your 7th house and obviously the south nodes in your 1st house. This is going to go on for at least a year and a half in some fashion, either positively or negatively, or in a bigger or smaller way. Good luck, Scorpio. So Sagittarius, you've just gone through the south nodes being in your sign. So the south nodes in your sign ended at the beginning of January 2022. And if you're watching this early on, when I'm making this in October 2021, Sagittarius, you still have the south nodes of the moon in your sign. And so you may still be letting go. And the key here is to let go and not cling. Do not cling when people, places, and things are running away from you. Important thing is to let them go. Now you've got your 12th house, which is a hidden house. It's hidden things like secrets. It's hidden places like hospitals, prisons, ashrams. It doesn't mean you're going to be going to them. It just means that you may have to go to these places for some reason. But I've always found the 12th house could actually just represent a time when you absolutely need to take some rest. And like I said, you've hosted the South nodes, letting go of things in 2021. So you literally may be saying, I've got to rest. I have to just put my feet up and stop. It's also the metaphysical. So maybe when the South nodes were in your sign in 2021, you learned to let go of things, and you found that the metaphysical world was something that really helped you cope. So this may be, maybe you took up some meditation. Maybe you took up yoga. Maybe you went to an ashram. Maybe you met up with a guru that really helped you get back on your path. Well, those things are still in place right now, and certainly meditation would be really good for you around this eclipse. But you've got the sun in your 6th house. So the 6th house represents health, generally speaking. So it's possible at this eclipse there will be some highlight on your health. And if there is, pay attention to it, because it'll just be a tap on the shoulder to say, hey, something's not right here. And so get that checked out, Sagittarius. But it's also your day-to-day work. Now, it could be that you start a new job. This is, you going to a job every day. And so this may be you taking up some new job that you enjoy very much and that you've been looking forward to. But it could involve your health. I'm getting an intuitive hit that it's probably your health. Keep us posted, Sagittarius. But I would say overall, get some rest. You've been through a lot for a year and a half prior to 2022, and that might be what you just need. Please take up some kind of meditation. If you can't meditate, go for walks in nature. That can always work too. If you can't do that, put your feet on the ground. So don't have any shoes on or socks, and put your feet on the ground and have that energy come up and help heal you. All right, Capricorn. Capricorn, you've got this moon in your 11th house. And so this really highlights a few things. The 11th house typically is your friends and groups. It's also your hopes and wishes. But it does rule the electronic media as well. So that's emails, YouTube, Instagram, all that type of thing. So it could be that some culmination comes about here in those areas as well that may benefit you. Just because it's a full moon doesn't mean it's going to be bad for you. But there's some kind of highlight in this area. It could be that maybe some group you belong to or friends that you belong to become very active on social media, for instance, and this somehow changes something up for you. Now you've got the sun in the opposite house, which is the 5th house. So this says to me that being your authentic self, maybe even being your authentic artistic self, is going to be important with regards to manifestation of this eclipse that's in your 11th house. So I would say around this eclipse, please don't hesitate to be your authentic self, but the 5th house rules a lot of things. So it could be that children become more important for you, your children. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Maybe they'll become more active. The 5th house is also the house of fun. Maybe after hosting, well, Pluto is still in your sign, but it's at the end of your sign. But maybe all the transformation that most Capricorns have been going through for literally years, they now say, I want to have some fun. So the 5th house is also the house of fun. So maybe that's what you're going to do with this eclipse, is make a decision to maybe join a new group or rekindle friendships in your 11th house so that you can actually have some fun. But it's also the house of your own business. So it could be also a trigger point of you starting your own business here. That could also be a reality. Yeah. And because the sun represents men, it could be that there's an important male that comes into your life that somehow helps trigger some of this stuff. Now the 5th house is also true love. That could be on the cards as well. If you incorporate the 11th house, maybe a friend becomes a lover, or a lover becomes a friend. Either way. Yeah. So as I mentioned, Pluto is still in Capricorn. But it really is just transformed the very late born Capricorns. So most of the Capricorns are out of this. But those born late in the sign in January, you still may have the effects of Pluto transforming you. So this eclipse may be a little more important for those Capricorns that are late born. And again, I'd love to hear from you if you've got these placements late in your chart, and tell us how you're getting along. So good luck to you, Capricorn. All right, we've got Aquarius next. So Aquarius, this falls in your 10th house of career. So something may be up, big or small, with regards to your career. Plus, it's also your long-term goals, which obviously in most cases would tie into your career. So you've got your 4th house is where the sun is. And on top of that, you are transiting Saturn all of 2022 in your sign Aquarius. So this says to me, there's an overlay of this Saturn putting in structures, maybe even for some bringing in rewards, because Saturn can bring in rewards for those that have worked hard. But it is going to be related to your 10th and 4th house areas. So we look at here, your 4th house is the house of home, and then as I mentioned, the 10th house is your career. So there seems to be some kind of polarity between your home and your career. What could that kind of play out as? It could play out as a few things. It could mean that you've got to move, you've got to sell your home because of a career move. Maybe you move to a whole new city and you've got to sell your home and get a new one. Alternatively, it could also be that you decide that you want to work from home, and therefore your home becomes this place that you've got to transform into something that you can actually use as a workspace. And that becomes where your career manifests itself instead of the 10th house. What happens is you eclipse out of the place that you actually do your career presently, and then put that into your 4th house of literally your home. Now, the 4th house also represents your mother. It represents your habits. It represents the home that you were, brought up in, and by extension, that would also say the habits that you were brought up with, generally speaking, that would be instilled early on in life from your family. So your family is brought into the mix here too. So these could also be featured for some reason with regards to the 4th house and the sun there. So there could be something that comes up in those areas that are important for you to deal with that somehow impact your career. Maybe you've got to, for some reason, take care of some 4th house, literally your house matters, that affects your job. But hosting Saturn in your sign Aquarius, I would say, is actually a good thing. This is a 30-year cycle with the Saturn here. So it'll take 30 years for Saturn to come back into your sign. And I would say that this is a phenomenal opportunity for you to put some structures in place that really work for you and your future. Aquarius is all about the future, right? In conjunction with Jupiter as well. Okay, good luck, Aquarius. Okay, Pisces. So Pisces, this full moon eclipse happens in your 9th house. And the 9th house, generally speaking, can cover things like travel. It is foreign places, foreign people, foreign things. It's the house of publishing. It is to do with teachers. It's also higher education. So any or all of those areas could be featured for you where there may be an ending. What could typically be happening? Well, this is going on towards mid-May, getting towards the end of May. Maybe you're going to be finishing up an advanced degree, right? And that may be something on the card. Maybe you're a teacher and you're finishing up with regards to things that you're doing in the school. Or it could have you, because this is a total eclipse, you making this big decision to have a round the world trip. So you take up some kind of travel plans and put those in effect for yourself. But you've got the sun appearing in your 3rd house. So the 3rd house is mainly communications, and when you juxtapose it with the opposite, which is the 9th house, we're looking at writing. So the 3rd house is about writing things, Typically, it would be writing like short courses, short things like that, the certificate type things. And then, of course, the ninth house is publishing those things. So it could be, if you look at both of these going together, that something that you wrote now gets published. I mean, that's what I see this as typically playing out as. But the third house is also your siblings. So for some reason, your siblings could come into view. Maybe, I'm just thinking intuitively, maybe you and your siblings decide, hey, let's take mom and dad on this great trip that they've always wanted to do. Let's all go together as a family. And then the ninth house is activated where you plan the travel, right? The third house is also your neighborhood. So it could be that your neighborhood becomes more active for you as well with the sun sitting there. And yeah. So Neptune is also in your sign, Pisces, and as you know, it's been in your sign for some time. It's going to be hovering around the 20, 21, 22 degree mark of Pisces, so it is gradually making its way out of your sign. But this adds an element of, it's at 20 degrees, and it's, you know, it's in trine within 5 degrees of the moon in Scorpio. So this is setting up a really delicious, lovely energy where you may feel inspired at this full moon, even though it's a full moon. There may be some kind of inspirational thing that happens for you, or maybe you will intuitively come up with something that's a benefit for you in either probably the ninth house, maybe that travel that I talked about. You luck into this phenomenal deal where your whole family can go off and have this trip of a lifetime. And you just managed to stumble across it, but it's that whole Neptune bringing inspiration into your sign. But Neptune can also go the other way. So just on its own, Neptune can bring in a lot of deception. It's that smoke and mirrors type thing where you can't really trust what's coming in. So, you know, it's that sign of the fishes where one fish is going down into the murky depths and the other fish is going up into the higher levels of agape love, right? So it can go either way. I would say if I was hosting Neptune in my sign, I would always just be double checking things. Don't ever take anything at face value. So now I'm talking specifically about the effect of Neptune here, not necessarily the eclipse, but this Neptune in your sign will be operating at the same time. At its highest level, Neptune is going to give you great inspiration. It can make dreams come true. So maybe this eclipse, for some of us with Pisces, will have some dreams come true. All right, Aries, you are next. Aries, this full moon total eclipse falls in your 8th house. And of course, I spoke about the 8th house before earlier on in the video. Why? Because Scorpio in the natural zodiac does actually rule the 8th house. So this is a little more important for you too. The 8th house really deals with things like I spoke about earlier: inheritances, your psychological self, shared resources, taxes, shared bank accounts, your psychological self. So those, one or all, could be highlighted at this time unexpectedly, because this is a total eclipse. You've got your sun in the 2nd house, which is opposite the 8th house. So the sun in the 2nd house really highlights the money that you earn or the things that you value. And I feel this particular eclipse for some Aries, that something's going to be triggered for you psychologically, where you're going to start valuing yourself a lot more, or asking other people to value you more via the money that you make. So in other words, asking for a raise, and that you get it with the full moon total eclipse, that you can let go of one way of earning the money and get more money. That I see highlighted for you too. And the other reason I say that is because you're hosting Chiron, which is the asteroid of basically healing, or where we're wounded, in your sign. So it's all talking about you healing. And when we talk about the 2nd house, we're talking about your values, the value of yourself. So maybe you get this intuitive hit, or maybe through psychological counseling, Aries, you realize that I've just not been valuing myself, and I've let other people run roughshod over me, and I need to stop that. And I'm going to start with insisting people treat me correctly, and maybe letting go of some people that you valued that have never been valuing you. I'm getting that for some Aries right now. But on another front, it could all be this whole axis of the 8th house, 2nd house is money. So it could be that you decide to retire. You know, the 8th house is leveraging your investments, your 401ks, right? The stock market, pulling your money in. So it could be that you decide at this time, I'm going to retire. But it can also make you decide to pull some of your money out. And with this whole North Node, South Node axis in Taurus and Scorpio, just as a general overarching theme, we're looking at the money that we have in our lives and our investments, generally speaking, for the collective. So this plays straight into you at this full moon total eclipse. So you may take a hard look at what you're investing, how you're investing. Maybe you will also take some of the money that you earn, your 2nd house, and start putting a lot more into your investments in your 401ks with the view in mind of retiring maybe at the end of this time period. All right, so for Taurus. So Taurus, you're obviously highlighted at this eclipse because you've got the sun. You're hosting the sun in your sign. But the 7th house is what's activated for you by the full moon total eclipse. So depending what degree and what other planets or luminaries you have in Taurus, like your sun, will depend how intense this eclipse will affect you. But certainly your 7th house is going to be up in some way. The 7th house is all partnerships. It's also clients. So it could be that for some reason your clients are highlighted. Maybe you will have a lot more clients come in, even though it's a full moon and it typically means culminations and endings. Eclipses, especially totals, are wild cards. So you could lose one set of clients and then have a whole new set come in for you that are very beneficial for you long term. It could be that a partnership ends for you. This could be a business partnership or a marriage, but it could be any partnership. As I spoke about earlier with Scorpio, it could be that you want to let your therapist go because you really haven't been benefiting from it, or you don't feel you've been benefiting. Maybe your lawyer hasn't been doing a good job and you let them go, where you get this epiphany saying, you know what, I need to change this. But something in the 7th house is going to come up for you in all or one of the areas that I just mentioned. With the sun in the 1st house, now this will be at 16 degrees. So if you do have your sun here, you're going to have Uranus there too. So Taurus, this is a little different for you because you're hosting Uranus, the planet of unexpected, surprising things coming into your life in your 1st house of yourself. If by chance you have anything around the 16-degree mark, this could be a little bit of an upsetting time where unexpected things happen to you. But as I always say, when we have Uranus coming in affecting us directly, it just means you've not been shifting something that you should have been shifting all along. And long term, you're going to be very happy that whatever shifted unexpectedly did shift. So do bear that in mind if you do have something a little more upsetting happening to you. But it could just be you breaking free. I mean, that's the other aspect about Uranus, hosting Uranus in your 1st house. I'm breaking out and I'm breaking out free. Now, remember, Uranus takes about 87 or 88 years to go around the sun. So for pretty well everybody, if you're hosting Uranus in your 1st house right now, you're never going to see this again. So this is a significant event for some Taurians. And just as a heads up too, in August, Uranus will be conjuncting the North Nodes in your sign. So August may also happen, and I'll talk about this obviously in July or August too, but as a heads up for you, maybe mark that on your calendar. All of August could also be significant in terms of major changes happening in your life. Why don't you be the leader and captain of your ship and your life And look to August as a time where you make big changes to any part of your life. The first house is all aspects of your life. Okay, good luck to you, Taurus. All right, Gemini, so you're next. Gemini, you, depending when you're watching this video, just hosted the north nodes of the moon in your sign. So you've been through the ringer a little bit in terms of really reorganizing your life. And typically you will have had things come in that change the direction of your life completely for the positive. But this particular eclipse falls in your 6th house. And the 6th house, generally speaking, is the house of health, whether it's you changing up the way you eat, the way you exercise, anything to do with that. You could have a little tap on the shoulder too, where some small things happens with regards to your health, and you need to take care of it. So this is what you should be doing, is taking care of it, if it is that. It's also your day-to-day job. It could be that you get a new job coming in. It's also habits. So you're like your daily habits, those could change up for you for some reason. So maybe you have to change up your day-to-day job somehow. Maybe the actual place that you work changes. Maybe there's a subsidiary out there of the company that you work for, and they want you to go to another end of town. It's that kind of thing that could set up for you with the 6th house highlighted. But in ancient astrology, the 6th house represented burdens that we carried that were really not ours to begin with. So for some Geminis, this highlight of the 6th house could really have you have the ability to let go of some major burden that you've for some reason been carrying that just is eclipsed out of your life. That whole burden just leaves you. Now the sun is in your 12th house. As I mentioned, you were hosting the north nodes in your sign for a year and a half up till the beginning of January 2022. I say you also may need rest. The 12th house is the house of rest. I suspect for a lot of Geminis, that's what you're going to be doing or wanting to do at this full moon total eclipse that will be in Scorpio. But it could also highlight anything else. 12th house. 12th house is secrets coming up. It's an eclipse. Typical time when some big secret, yours or someone else's, that affects you, could come to light. It's also, at its best, is developing the metaphysical side of you, taking up yoga, taking up meditation. Maybe after all the activity that you went through with the north nodes in your sign, that you've learned that meditating, going out into nature, doing yoga, has really assisted your inner self, right? And then that yoga could also affect the opposite house, your 6th house, which is where the moon is at, right? Your health. Yeah, so think about that. It's like your psychological health, doing sort of meditation type thing, will impact the 6th house of your health, your physical health, right? Now, this is another heads up for you. You've got 2 things happening in Gemini in 2022. The first one is that you've got a Mercury retrograde, and of course that's ongoing right now, and you're hosting that. It's at 3 degrees. It starts at the retrograde in Gemini. So check to see, where, if you've got anything like your sun or moon or Mercury itself around 3 degrees, that's where that retrograde starts at. But this also says to me that you should double check everything at this eclipse with regards to any kind of communications. You will be directly affected by that Mercury retrograde. And so it's just missed communications, it's miscommunicating, it's computers, it's the classical, right? When you've got Mercury retrograde in Gemini, it's your classical Mercury retrograde. So, upgrade your computer and your iPhones on time, and just make sure all the messaging you're putting out is clear. And, nothing wrong with double checking, like if you're sending out some important, whether it's important written work, emails, or even presenting type stuff, double check it with people that you trust before you send it out. And just do it around this eclipse time period. Let's just say the whole month of May, just to have yourself covered, okay? Now, the other thing that you've got happening is you're going to have a Mars retrograde. This only happens every few years too. So at the end of October 2022, you're going to be hosting Mars retrograde. So what does this tell you? This gives you a heads up that for some reason, let's just say from October right the way through probably December time period 2022, you're going to have to be going back on things. Something is going to have, some energy is going to have to be going back into reviewing something. So check to see where, what house Gemini falls for you. If you are a Gemini, where does your sun fall, for instance? If it's the ascendant, where does the ascendant fall? Because there'll be slightly different effects. And you can leave, you know, comments in the comments box, and we can talk about this back and forth. It's always great to enlighten other people that may have something similar to you. Good luck, Gemini. All right, Cancers. So Cancer, this is kind of neat because Cancer, you've got your 5th house highlighted. So the 5th house is the house of fun. So it may be that you decide, I am going to start having fun. And this eclipse in May says, all right, let's start right now. But the other thing that it can highlight is your children may, for some reason, come into focus. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It might mean that you have to take care of something with them, or that they just literally may come back. Maybe they've been away and they come back into your life. But heads up for those Cancers who do not want to get pregnant, because this is a time when you can get pregnant. So fair warning for those that don't want to. If you do want to, then I would say this is an excellent time to get pregnant. The other thing is it's an excellent time also, even though it's a full moon, to start a business. Start your own business would be a great time too. I have a Cancer ascendant, and I think I might buy some lottery tickets around this time period too. I'm not saying you'll win the lottery, but games of chance are also ruled by the 5th house. But you know, the real thing around the 5th house is expressing your authentic self. So it's important at this eclipse, if you have not been expressing your authentic self, something may come up that forces you to express your authentic self. Maybe someone's going to challenge you and they're going to say, we don't feel that you're expressing who you really are. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're going to benefit because you express your authentic self. Together with the authentic self, of course, is the artistic self. And of course, the other thing that 5th house rules is true love. So for those Cancers rising or Cancer suns that have been waiting for true love to come in their life, this could eclipse somebody into your life that's very important. And that person could be someone who is a friend. And why is that? Because the sun is going to be in the opposite house, in the 11th house of friends and groups. But it can also be hopes and wishes, right? So maybe something that you've been really wishing for actually comes true during this eclipse time period. Now, if there's a direct connection with something in your natal chart, this effect can last for 6 months. The other thing that the 11th house rules is anything kind of electronic, anything on the internet. So that would be things like emails, literally the internet, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all those things fall under the auspices of the 11th house. So I would say that's the other area that could become, if you are being your authentic self, that those become really, really highlighted for you, where they just maybe boom. If you've got a website or a YouTube channel, these could boom for you as a result of this eclipse. Yeah. All right, next we have Leo. Leo rising, Leo sun. Leo, this is your 4th house that the actual eclipse falls in. And so this says to me something in your home, your mother, your habits, to some extent maybe your family. Something is going to be highlighted here that you've got to let go of. On the surface, it could be that you let go of a home, that you sell your home. But you've got the sun in your 10th house, which of course is your career. So this is an opposition we've got, right? We've got the sun in the 10th house of career opposing the eclipse of the moon in your 4th house. So it could be similar to Aquarius, but the other way around, where something is happening in your home. Maybe it is that your career is going to move to your home, and that could be highlighted. But it could be the opposite too. It could be that you have been working from home, like a lot of people have in 2021, and you're forced to go back into the workplace, the 10th house. So that could be a theme that happens to some Leos as well. But it could be buying and selling homes too. I mean, I talk about, because it's a full moon, it's an ending. The 4th house typically on the surface would mean, you know, you have to let your home go. But it can also mean that you acquire a home. An eclipse is a wild card type thing, so it could be both. It could also be a time where you literally just let go of some of your bad habits. And maybe those bad habits have been affecting your 10th house of career, and you realize it and you've got to let it go. It could be your mother is focused in some kind of focus. Maybe she's going to come and live with you. Maybe your mother is going to come and live in your home with you. And that's obviously a big thing that you have to take care of. Or that, say you've got your mother living with you in your home and you decide that she has to now go into long-term care. That's something that could also be up here as well, because her care has been impacting your 10th house of career, where you've not been able to do proper work in your career because of the things you had to attend to in your 4th house of home. Yeah. Good luck, Leo. For Virgos, Virgo, it's your 3rd house that's affected by the eclipse itself. So the 3rd house is all about communications. It's also about siblings. It's about your neighborhood. It's about sales and commerce. So any of those areas could be highlighted right now for you. Now, in the opposite sign, which is Taurus, that's where your sun is going to be, and that's the 9th house. So the 9th house represents travel, foreign people, foreign lands, foreign things. It represents higher education. It's also representing our higher selves. It can represent teachers or a guru coming into our lives as well. But I really see this thing more of you maybe putting together some kind of communication plan and or some kind of maybe small courses that you can then get published, or that a male, remember we talked about earlier that sun, a transiting sun can represent a male, maybe someone in higher education is looking at some of the things that you've written and they like them and they want to publish them for you. So it could be that things you've written, whether they're courses or literally writing a manuscript, these could be published for you at this time too. So maybe it's something that you never thought would get published. Out of the blue, with this total eclipse, boom, it happens. But the other thing is that your siblings could be highlighted here, and very much like I spoke about with Aquarius, it could be that you decide to take this foreign trip with your siblings in May of 2022, or that at least you planned for it. But it could have you just doing a lot more things in your neighborhood for some reason, or you become much more active in your neighborhood for some reason. It may involve some kind of teacher type role as well. Yeah. You have Neptune in your 7th house, which of course is Pisces, and that's opposite you, Virgo. So this effect of Pisces can go a couple ways. Typically, you have to be careful of any partnerships, either existing partnerships, whether it's business or marriage, but it can also bring in some very high-level spiritual stuff for you too. So it just depends. I would just, if it was me, if I was hosting Neptune in my 7th house, I would be very careful with, especially with regards to business partnerships. There may be people trying to do a smoke and mirrors on you, but that could also be in personal relationships too, that someone's hiding stuff from you or deceiving you. Neptune is the height of deception. So just be careful of that. as I said, at its highest, this could bring in a spiritual guru that's very good for you. So it's not all that bad. So that's just talking about the Neptune part, which is opposite of your sign in Pisces and in your 7th house. That's also ongoing at this full moon total eclipse in May 2022. So it's really just kind of a heads up for you. Now, what's really nice for you though, Virgo, is that you have Uranus trining your sign. So if you have either, anything, typically maybe your sun at 16 degrees of Virgo, at this eclipse, this is going to be awesome for you. You may have some unexpected favorable thing come in for you that you never expected. That it could be in almost anything, where you just get this wonderful, maybe a wonderful trip comes up for you that you couldn't even imagine happens. But Uranus trining your sign, and as I mentioned earlier, Uranus takes quite a long length of time. It's like 87 or 88 years to go around the sun. So this very positive effect of Uranus trining your sign is super positive and will only be once in a lifetime. So this just says unexpected things could be very favorable for you at this eclipse. So stay open to maybe something not seeming to work out for you, or unexpectedly the rug seems to be pulled from underneath you, but in reality, it's actually something that's going to benefit you big time. All right, so we're going to end up here with you, Libra. So Libra, this is your 2nd house that's highlighted, and the 2nd house typically is the income that you earn. So it could be that it's eclipsed out of your life, that you decide to leave a job that you're earning income in, or that the job somehow fades out for you and is replaced by something different. Maybe you've decided that you've not been valued where you're earning your money, and you decide that you want to get out of what you're doing. It's an eclipse, total eclipse. So it means you're going to make some big changes here. It could be also that where you earn your money, you unexpectedly are given a major change in position where you move up earning more money as well as a different position. That can happen too. You've got the sun in the 8th house. So both the 2nd house and the 8th house are money houses. But the sun in the 8th house speaks to your psychological self, but it also speaks to your shared resources, your investments, your 401k. So kind of a little bit like when I spoke about Aries, a little bit opposite to what I said to Aries, you're still featuring the same axis. It's just that the eclipse itself is in your 2nd house, and for Aries, the eclipse is in their 8th house. So this really says that I would say that you make decisions of looking very carefully at your investments, probably for most people, your 401k, and you decide that you can take a lot more of the money that you earn and you can put it right there into your 401k, stock market, your investments. Now, you're going to have this Uranus around 16 degrees of Taurus in your 8th house. So this says that you might get some kind of out of the blue, unexpected thing come in with regards to investing that works out to be really good for you long term. Now, I always caution people, unless you are an expert in investing, that you should seek advice when you do this. But this is a once in a lifetime thing. You've got Uranus in your 8th house. This is going to bring in major psychological enlightenment where you get it, you are enlightened, but it also brings in unexpected opportunities in the investment world. But like I said, make sure that you are double checking, unless you are already an expert in this field, before you pull the trigger and put thousands of dollars into some stocks. But there's a possibility here, especially if you've got something around 16 degrees Taurus, that you could have some lucky stuff going on here with regards to investments. Now, Libra, I'm going to give you the heads up on your Mercury retrograde. So you've got a Mercury retrograde in September in your sign. So this will have, depending where you've got a Libra in your chart, what house it falls in, you're going to be going back and re-reviewing some things. Now, Libra itself typically refers to the diplomatic service. It Obviously, the symbol or glyph are the scales of justice. So this could have, for some Librans, going back over some kind of legal stuff in September that needs to be reviewed. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It could be a time where also in September 2022, you're going to be really required to pull that tact and charm and sweetness out with regards to maybe some kind of communication or document that you've got to revise, that you've got to maybe sell it. You've got to sell whatever it is that you are producing in terms of like some kind of document or communication. It can even be a presentation. That can be represented by Mercury too. It can also be your thoughts for that matter. I don't get that with this intuitively. Typically it's going to be something like legal documents that you've got to go over, or you're delivered legal documents that you have to re-review again in September 2022. All right, Libra, good luck with that. So this ends this video with regards to the first total eclipse, which will be a full moon in Scorpio on the 15th of May, 2022. I'm going to end by saying that the next total eclipse is going to be on the 8th of November, 2022 at 16 degrees of Taurus and 1 minute. And notably, this will be exactly conjunct Uranus. And Uranus will be retrograde at this time, but it's an exact. So I would say for the whole collective, but especially for people individually, take a look at your chart. I'll be covering this total eclipse as well in a video, but this gives you the heads up for something in November, right? Especially if you've got some conjunctions that are happening at 16 degrees of Taurus. This will be an important turning point for some people. It's a full moon too. We also have a Mars that is going to be going retrograde. That's going to also be in that time period, and that'll be in Gemini. So certainly Geminis will be affected, but also Sagittarians will be affected in terms of directly, right? You look at the opposition, you look at the conjunctions, and then you look at the oppositions in terms of direct effects. So that's the other thing that we've got coming up as well. And I'll be discussing all these things in other videos. As always, I would love to do your chart. Contact me below in the text box. It's pretty easy. Go onto my services tab. You can pay there. Contact me by email, and we can get all your birth details. Time, of course, is really important. And set something up. I can do a Zoom meeting for those that do not live in San Diego, and send you a recording as well. I also do a full text report as well, so you can read and not have to be looking at all these symbols in the charts, although I do supply you your charts as well as part of my service. All right, sending everybody lots of love. Please take care of yourself. I see this full moon as a big turning point for a lot of people, especially you, Scorpio. But Taurus, you're going to be in there too. Bye for now, and we will talk to you, I guess, in my December 2021 video. Take care, and bye for now.